That's not what it's like.
Absolutely. Well, funny enough, my wife was looking at some job adverts yesterday, and she said, "Could you just tell me what this is?" Because it was written in such a way that you had to have been immersed in that organisation to understand the lingo and everything else. So, again, write it from a candidate's perspective. So actually, they understand what you're about, and don't put acronyms in. And that's first-hand experience for only yesterday around just looking at job advert and going, even me working in HR and are familiar with it, I think I haven't a clue what they're asking you to do here.
That's a really good point. I mean, we and the other one is the job title. So again, work with people says, people have got your culture is great, and you'll develop a way of talking, but that doesn't mean that other people outside your office talk like that. So you might have a receptionist as the director of first impressions or something like that. But that was a real example as well.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a real example. So if you're advertising a job as the director of first impressions, no one's searching for the director of first impressions. They're searching for a receptionist. That's what they're looking for, because that's what they do. So it's really important to communicate to the candidate. So what we do is, does this sound like you? Do you believe in this? These are our values. This is what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to go. Does this sound like something that you would want to be a part of? These are the things that you want to know. And again, it's sort of simple stuff. It's just getting away from you and all the things that you want, thinking about, well, there's someone else who's choosing to work with you. They're choosing to spend their 40 hours a week of their time with you. You've got to offer them something that they want and something that they can buy into. Again, we call the mum test. So if my mum or your mum wouldn't know what the job was and say, "Oh, Kim, I've seen this job that you might be interested in," then you shouldn't be calling it that. You should be calling it something that's really simple and obvious. That's really important. And then communicating to the person on the other end, not from you. Don't get into this whole thing of lingo and laundry list of criteria. It's really important. That alone can transform your recruitment.
Absolutely, and some great advice there. And sometimes, as you say, we're so wrapped up in sort of what we want, we forget actually that someone on the other side is trying to relate that and go, yes, absolutely. And in some ways, why some recruitment fails is because if you make it so ambiguous that people then interpret it, and unless you can call it out in the recruitment process and challenge it, then people will go in, and we call it a psychological contract in the HR terms, that actually you're going to give me all of this in return for me giving you my time, effort, and otherwise. And if there was a mismatch there, what happens is that then just grows, and then people go, hang on, this is not the job that I applied for. So some really great advice. So what about when you get through? You've done your CV sifting, and so you're in the interviewing. So what is it that you would advocate by way of making sure that all of that good planning and all of that understanding gets translated into the interview? So you talked about the halos and horns and making sure that you don't sort of project yourself onto the interviewer. So what other tips would you be able to give to people that are either thinking about interviewing or going through the interview process?
That's a really good point. And again, something that goes back to planning and removing those potential tripwires. So what we do is split our interview process with our customers is into two parts. So the first part is around, can you do the job in our environment? So capability and environment. And then the second interview is around team fit. So with vision, values, and then motivation. So what motivates the candidate? By splitting the interviews into two parts like that, what that means is that you can focus on, and you can have maybe the technical person in your business who's trying to understand, can this person do this job? Which doesn't mean it's someone like we talked about earlier about maybe a managing director who's looking at the bigger strategic picture. So what that means is, but just by splitting the interview into two parts, is the director can come in the second part knowing that the person can do the job. All they're interested in now is, do they fit into our team? So the first tip I would say is, don't overload what you're trying to do into one interview. So don't try and bring in all these questions around, can you do the job? Can you know all this type of stuff and your team fit stuff into one interview, because it can put you under a lot of pressure. The second thing is, we set the questions in advance. So we agree weightings and scorings on those questions. So again, what what we'd say is when you first go advertising, don't go out with your big laundry list. Just focus on the KPI, the key things that we talked about earlier to be successful in this role in 12 months. That might be one or two things, because you're essentially fishing in a big ocean trying to attract people. Don't put that in, because you can, when you get to the interview stage, that's when you can start slimming down the people into to get the right person. So we set the questions in advance before you even go out there, because it takes the pressure off you when you're going in. If you're busy, like I said earlier, being super busy, and then you're not prepared. I've been guilty of this. You're not prepared. You turn up for an interview, you haven't got agreed the questions, and you start asking everyone different questions. Because the big thing in recruiting is consistency. It's consistent. You need a consistent way of being able to assess people at every stage of the process. That's a big tip is set your questions in advance and have a scoring system, and then the people sitting in the interview can ask the questions. Of course, you can probe deeper on them. So, what do you mean about that? And that's another big tip is don't talk too much in the interview. There's some stats which is people spend. I think it's some interviews spend 70% of the time or 80% of the time talking, because they're trying to sell their company to the candidate. Don't do that. They will ask you questions. Ask them, get through the questions that you've agreed to ask, because that will give you the consistency. When you come out at the end of it, and let's say you've done 5 interviews in a row, and you're going, well, I don't remember. And then you get to, oh, they like rugby. Oh, you're the one, do you want a job? Because that's what happens is people go, they'll do 5 interviews and then they are going, well, I can't remember, I can't compare them because we didn't really do it properly. So have a really unambiguous way of doing it. Just score them, then come out. So what did you score that person? I scored them this, and you scored them that. And then you get a much clearer way of doing it. And the other one, as I said, is split the interviews into a capability type exercise. Can they do the job? And then into a value fit. And it means the senior people in a business can not worry about that. They can just come in and maybe interview less people, knowing that they can do the job. So that's really important.
No, and some great advice. And I've been in that situation, and I do like to write stuff down. One of the tips that I give is when you are taking notes, write the question you've asked down as well as the answer that someone's given, because sometimes you look at it and go, oh, I forgot what that response is. So and I tend to talk to a bit of thumbs up, middle and down, so just as my initial sort of views. And I think you're right. And some we the whole the what, why, when, where, how types of questions is what a good interview would ask, isn't it? It's making that individual feel comfortable, and you start to probe in on the sort of things that you're interested in. So some great tips there, and just on a sort of a side note around interviewing. So what do you advocate by way of sort of dress sense? We're getting to a lot of things from our clients who are saying, I'm interviewing somebody, but because of COVID restrictions, we are doing it over the Zoom like we are doing now. And they've seen a real shift in sort of how people present themselves. So just really a bit of sort of a bit of feedback from yourselves. And do you see the same thing? Have your clients said actually we get people dressed up as informally as they would do if they were on face to face, through to people who sometimes have just come in from the day from their regular exercise and sat down and switched the thing on. So some tips just in the new modern world of candidate interviewing and recruitment that you could pass on.
Yeah, you're right. We see it, and virtually most of the first interviews that we do now are virtual. So there'd be a video call like this and focusing on the capability. I was talking about a minute, the capability and environment. But the thing is, I think it's like we had people as well, some clients who are really focused on a grammar on a CV, or so we do an application form. So because CVs are. You can't compare them. Like I said, the key to good recruitment is knowing what you're looking for, be able to measure it. And we had some people going, oh, well, the font of their CV, I don't like it. But that's not what you're looking for. So you're not looking for someone who can, well, maybe you are. If you're looking for a designer or someone who's writing, of course, that's important. But if you're looking for someone who's not going to be doing that as a part of their day job, it's not so important. So don't let these things hang-ups come in, and that leads into interviewing, which is, people are at home, so they might live in a small flat, they might have kids, they might have, they might not be able to present and sit, and you're in a lovely room where you are now.
Thank you.
In a lovely room, they might be in a small flat, but it's a really interesting question, because one of our clients is they're CEX, so the retail, sort of the games retailer, and their interview is they don't give guidance on dress sense, and they're quite relaxed, chilled sort of company. So I'd say is your dress sense should be like if you can communicate the culture of your business, what you're like, then the person coming to interview, they might turn up in a suit because that's what they should do for an interview, or they might turn up dressed down because they believe that's what you want them, that what you're like. So CX were really naughty with that. They wouldn't give guidance. They used to sort of laugh because some people would turn up really suited up and other people were really dressed down. But it wasn't. It was just sort of a bit of fun that they would have doing it. So it's up to you if you want someone to give guidance. Just if you want someone to wear a suit. I mean, does it make any difference if I'm sat here on the other end of a video screen and I'm wearing a shirt and tie? I think it does in certain circumstances, absolutely. But don't let it influence your hiring decision too much.
I think absolutely, Kim, and I think as you described, having those set questions and scoring, because you do hear that thing, it only takes a second to make a bad impression. I suppose that's the piece that your techniques are showing, is to say, okay, that's a bit of feedback you could give that says, just some feedback candidate, but we comment on, it was an interview. So and I do appreciate everything you say. We the sort of our home lives and work lives have blurred as a result of the pandemic, and we're all asked to work slightly differently. And it's one of those sort of things that we need to get used to in the modern world. So it's useful to sort of see things from your side. And I think actually, not telling anybody what to wear is a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose. It's incumbent, I suppose, on the person, the applicant, to say what is interview dress attire, and that will show a little bit of sort of forward thinking and a little bit of planning on their behalf. So I think it's been, I say, a really good insight, and for what I've taken away, really. So the key thing here is that planning, isn't it? Planning around your recruitment needs, planning around the recruitment process, and planning around what's going to happen when the individual joined. So from your perspective, if someone was to come to you and say, Kim, I'm just on the cusp of recruitment, what would be the sort of the number one things that you see that sort of causes failure in the recruitment, and one of your top tips to say this is how you can turn it into a success?
The number one thing is I think just wait. Don't let your time pressure, because like I said, time is a big thing that can, and your energy, because a big problem and a big thing that, again, we when we work with clients on, is to stop this. I'm so busy, because all that will mean is you will end up with less quality, because you won't be paying attention. It will take you a lot longer because you haven't organised and people aren't there, so which means you can lose people. The other thing is with recruitment is people massively underestimate the time that each thing involves. So if you go out there and you advertise and you get, say, 100 CVs through, so you get 100 CVs coming in. You've then got to review 100 CVs. And if you said it took you 10 minutes per CV, that's 100 times 10,000. That's 1,000 minutes. It's a lot of time just to do that. So, and again, how do you compare one CV to the other? They're not consistent. So the key to good recruitment is consistency, which is ask it. So again, like what we do is we've built a system is ask questions. So we invite someone to fill in an application form. So thank you very much for sending me your CV. Can you just complete this short application form? I don't mean fill out a really long, arduous thing, because you'll lose people. You want to keep people engaged. But ask some of the things you can ask. Again, so we ask some obviously capability questions around, technically, can they do the job? And certain jobs obviously require certain qualifications or licenses. Have you got that? Of course. But then you can ask some value questions. Now, in sales, a good question to ask is, how do you deal with rejection? Or ask that on the application form, because if that's what's really important to you, and you've identified that on the telescope, why are we hiring for this position? Because someone's got to have, the motivation to keep going. Ask that question on the application form. So that's a big tip is, don't rush out. Do not rush out. Take the time to understand why you're doing it, because you won't then go out then in a position of stress. You won't be worried. You'll be asking everyone the same questions. You'll be able to compare one to the other and agree as a team what those important things is. Because one of the things I was going to say is, don't ask a question unless you know what to do with the answer. So, because again, you've got a finite amount of time with someone, whether it be in a form or whether you're sitting in front of them in an interview. Don't ask them. So a question that people you might see is, tell me about your greatest achievement. Now you might think that's a great question, but I could come back and say, well, I won a scout badge for swimming. That's my greatest achievement in my life, is that I did that. What relevance does that have to the job that you're looking to hire me for? Unless you know what to do with the answer to that and what relevance it brings to the job and the role and the thing you're doing, don't ask it. And we'll see this all the time with this. I've got this killer question. And it's the same with psychometrics as well. Psychometrics is another area where people can get. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. I wouldn't recommend using psychometrics in your recruitment process. I think they're a great tool for managing people, because all you're doing is going, well, if you're like this, then you're going to be good, right? No, because you've just discounted this, 16 personalities, whatever way you want to look at it. If you want one person, you've discounted 15 sixteenths of the people that could be great in your team just because you want one personality type. And they're very complicated. The psychologists use them. Most of us, also, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know how that you can get the answer you're looking for by creating the consistency. So yeah, plan your time, be consistent, think about the candidate and not yourself. Talk to them as if, speak to them. Don't overcomplicate stuff with jargon and, remember the mum test. They're the things that you can really do to make, and ultimately, more importantly, make recruitment part of your strategy. Because if you're in this scenario and you're growing like that and you're struggling to people, you've got a problem that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as you go along, and it's harder and harder to solve.
And some great advice there, Kim. And I think as we move in the world, historical jobs are going, and therefore I heard an interview once where someone said, "Who can say that their granny was an SSO expert?" Because
yeah.
These jobs are new, and so taking that sort of approach you've advocated is going to ensure that you've got the right person for that. And I think that's going to happen. And I think COVID we've seen has seen a sort of creation of more hybrid roles where organisations have seen that they've had to be a little bit more flexible, and a consequence is sometimes people have to retrain and reskill. So some fantastic advice there, and Kim, and on behalf of ourselves and our followers, thank you very much for your time. We'll put your contact details on the end of this on this video. So if anybody that's listening wants to get in contact with Kim at Wavelength, your details will be on there. So again, thank you very much, and really insightful.
Yes,
thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.